Hello everyone and welcome to this course. Now before we define project management, I think it's important that we define what is a project. So what is a project then? So in order to have a project, we need something that needs to be done, something to do. And I thought I will attach some criteria to this. As I will say down the track, it's all open to interpretation, so there is not a rigid definition of what a project can be. But I'll try and define it as much as I can for you. So I came up with 4 criteria that I think are required for quote-unquote something to be called a project. So let's have a look at those 4 criteria. The first one is this thing that we have to do needs to be specific, cannot be vague. For instance, I'll be talking about walking as an example a lot during this course. If you say, I want to walk more, for instance, that is not really a project. It's not specific enough. It's the same with being healthier. I want to be healthier. It's a goal, probably, but it's not really a project until you really define exactly and specifically what you want to achieve. So that's the first thing. The thing that we want to do cannot be ongoing. It has to be a one-off with a start, a finish, and after it's completed, we move on, we do something else. I'll come back to this one. The 2 other criteria I think would make sense to you. To be a project is something usually that requires planning. If you just do something without any plan, and if you can do it anytime, then that's not really a project. And the last criteria, it's a little bit intuitive as well, and it's a bit related to the one before about requiring planning. It has to be large enough. Just want to elaborate just a tiny bit on the one-off, because as I mentioned, it's something that people struggle with sometimes. Let's say you're part of the Olympic Committee review. You review bids from different cities, and those cities submit bids to you to host the next Olympics. So that's your job. You're doing this day in, day out. They come and go, and it can be the bid for the Rio team, it could be for the Tokyo team and the Paris team. So you're doing this more or less on an ongoing basis. Is that a project for you? I don't think so. This is what is being called a business as usual or BAU activity. On the other hand, each one of those teams, like the Rio team or the Tokyo team, they have a project because it's something new for them that requires planning, it's very specific, and it's once off. Once it's finished, then they move on. They have a start, a finish. So I think that explains a little bit more, if you like, the difference between ongoing and project activities. Another example, very quickly, would be, let's say you're part of an IT team and your job is to make hardware maintenance, and you do that all year long. As soon as there's a problem, you fix it, or if a server needs upgrade, then you upgrade it. So for me, this is business as usual. This is not a project. That doesn't mean it's easy, but you do that day in, day out. On the other hand, if your company decides to upgrade all the servers on site, and they will allocate a project manager usually, if it's very big, to ensure that all the tasks are coordinated. It is not because an activity is complex that it has to be a project. It can be very complex, but it's BAU ongoing, so it doesn't fit the criteria of being a project. Now we know what a project is. We just need to define project management. So let's have a look. This arrow here, that is project management. Is all we need to do to get things over the line. Now the project management, the way I have it here, is the management of all activities required to implement the project. Now that doesn't mean that we have to check every single activity on the project, but we need to ensure that actually someone is on top of all these activities. And more often than not, you need to implement on time, on budget, and it has to be of good quality. Now the definition of project manager is very simple. Responsible for managing this process. The project manager needs to ensure that this something is being implemented. So in order to implement project, we usually follow a process, and this is what we'll see in the next class. Now let's have a look at the process usually used to manage projects. So projects are usually managed around 4 phases. There are some methodologies, they have some slight variations around those, but at the end of the day, it's more or less the same. Now let's go through each one of these phases one by one. The first phase is the initiation phase. So during this phase, we decide if we formally go ahead with the project or not. Are we really doing this? So this is why I said potential project before. Is that in theory, we are not in the project yet. Now, say one executive, for instance, he might have a great initiative or project, but if the company doesn't have the money to do it, or if the initiative said would have too much of a big risk, then the company is not going to put money on this. And before we go too far into planning and spending money towards that initiative, we regroup in a way. And we ask ourselves, is it worth putting our money into this or our time? We just need a tick. We just need a formal approval. Yes, that's a great idea. Let's do it. And then we can put aside the cost for it. Now, if the project is approved, then we can proceed to the next phase, which is planning. So during planning, we plan for things that will happen during the next phase. How are we doing this? Obviously, I'll go into more detail in each one of those phases moving forward. But for a quick overview, that's all you need to know. Planning is how we will be running this project, more or less. What activities do we need to run this project? Then, when we all agree on the plan, we can move to the next phase, which is the execution phase. During the execution phase, we are actually doing the work. So the question that we need to ask ourselves as a project manager or as a team member is all going well? Is all going okay? What can I do to help? How can I fix stuff? Towards the end of execution, there is sometimes something to implement, and then we would implement the project, but it is not finished yet. We still have another phase to go through, which is the closing of the project. During the closing, we ask ourselves 2 questions. Is everything done? And how well did we go? How did we go? So we wrap things up in a way. We close properly and we reflect on how we've done it. So as a heads up, obviously in part 2, we will see those phases in a little bit more detail. But for the moment, I think that gives you just a very high-level overview of the process for project management. Now we've just seen the 4 phases of project management. So the challenge I found with project management methodologies is from that point it all becomes very complicated very quickly. For that reason, I wanted to give you something simpler. I wanted to give you a simplified view of project management. And at the same time, I wanted it to be a very thorough view, a very complete view. So I thought it'd be good if I could give you a list of things that you could refer to as you progress through this course maybe, or if you are involved in a project. I came up with a list of 9 things that you need to monitor, you need to assess, you need to keep on top of, you need to really keep an eye on all the time. Calling them the 9 things didn't sound very professional, so I've been calling them the 9 areas. The 9 areas of project management that you need to monitor while you go through the 4 phases of the project. Here's the list of these 9 areas. We have scope, schedule, cost, risks, quality, issues, admin, stakeholders, and approvals. Now in part 3, I will show you how you can combine the 4 phases of project management with this list of 9 areas. Together they will combine to form the project management roadmap that I have created. But now let's have a look at these 9 areas in a little bit more detail. Let's define these 9 areas then that we need to assess and monitor. Scope. So the scope is what needs to be done. Usually when you need to do something, there is someone there who knows exactly what they want. Let's say you're being asked as a project manager to implement a website. So you would have someone from the business who would tell you, I want my website to be like this, and I want my website to be able to do that. That's what we call business requirement. They will write a document and they will give it to you, and that will be the scope of your project. But it's not always the case. You don't always have business requirements. Let's say to go back maybe to the hardware upgrade across the board. It's not the business that are going to tell you, yeah, I want you to upgrade all this. It's more or less mandatory, you have to do it, and therefore you have to put all that in your scope. Your scope is to upgrade all the servers of the company. Next, we move on to the schedule. So the schedule, it's quite intuitive. How long will it take, and when can we have this? The cost. How much will it cost? It's quite simple as well. Risks. Risks, it's any future threats to the project, and we usually track that in a risk register. We will go through the risk register later on in the course. The quality. How will we check the project quality, and how will we check the end product quality? It's not only a matter of checking the quality of what we deliver, but also making sure that we are doing this properly, that we are following the process properly. Issues, as opposed to risks, that could be a potential problem. Issues, it's happening now. We have an issue now. Project admin, so it's quite broad. So you have the reporting, you have the meetings, you have communication, is all the governance of the project, is the meetings, all that you need to do. You would chair meetings, you would write minutes, you would update everyone by communicating with them, and you would buy stuff if you are in charge of buying stuff. Stakeholder. So we will go into this in a little bit more detail later on, but in a nutshell is who are we working with, who will be impacted by the project at the end of the day, and how we keep them happy. It's called a stakeholder assessment. And finally, approvals. And approval, it is often forgotten as really something to check all the time. And I like, this is what I like about this setup is, if you manage a project, you have to bear all those in mind all the time. In part 3, I will show you how you can combine the 4 phases of the project management process with the 9 areas that I've just mentioned. That will give you the roadmap. My students usually feel it's best to walk you through this roadmap in part 3. After the part 2, which is explaining the process in a little bit more detail, is completed. But for the moment, just knowing these 9 areas will be very useful for you. Welcome to the project initiation phase. So when we introduced the phases earlier on, we talked about project initiation, and we gave this example of going for a walk. So at some stage, we have to decide if yes or no we go for a walk. So we could see that as the initiation. And once we have agreed that we're going, it becomes a project. So we are in project land, more or less. For business, obviously, the decision can be a bit more complex, but it's the same principle. So in a nutshell, the key question that we want to answer during initiation is, are we really doing this? Are we really committing to this? And this is what's tricky about the initiation phase. It's half not a project, and towards the end, if we go ahead, it's a project. And I'll explain why it has to become a project halfway through, and the key reason is that we need a project manager to do the paperwork in the end. So in theory, it's not a project until after the initiation, but still, it'd be good to have a PM to do the paperwork. Now I think we can get started. Let's have a look into more detail of what is required for us to make a decision. Let's go ahead with this as a project. Just as a repeat, if you like, the end game is to gain approval to proceed as a project. So we have to ask ourselves, what would be required for all these guys in the room to say with confidence, this is a good investment. It makes sense, let's do it, let's go for it. So one of the questions is, the first actually I would say question is what do we want to do? Which in project management talk is called the scope. So we need to define the scope. Also, we need to say, can we actually do it? I mean, if you want to go for a trek, for instance, for 3 to 4 weeks, can we actually do it? Do we have time to do it? How much will it cost? At this stage, it's early stage, so it's just an order of magnitude, I suppose. But that's very important to decide if we're going to go ahead with a project or not. And it's called a budget, I suppose. How long will it take? Project manager talk, a schedule. We want to know when that can be implemented, because that will influence if we want to go ahead with the project or not. If we say, if everybody thinks that's a great idea, but you cannot have it until, 3 or 4 years time. So maybe it's not as good an idea as we thought. Maybe we can have some lower hanging fruits, and we can have some maybe quick wins earlier instead of waiting for that big thing there. A very important thing is the risks. Any risks we need to be aware of. And if we find risks, how are we going to address them? Are there any showstoppers? You come up with an idea. Let's say you're the guy who wanted to go for this walk, and you don't want to hear about the risk because you're really focused. And if someone tells you, oh, there's some heavy rains plan, oh, what? There's some bushfires around, it doesn't matter, we will check before. So the person who would bring the project idea usually would have blinkers on. He wouldn't really be interested in bringing all the risks that come with his idea. So you say, oh no, that's okay, let's do it. So it's your role, if you're involved as a project manager. If you're not, it's the role of the executives, of everyone around, to really highlight the risk. It's not that we are being negative here, but it's like we want to give this information before it's too late, before we are running the project and we start spending the money. So risk is very important. And based on all that, you make a decision. Is it worth doing? So if you're lucky, you have an executive and she has the business case ready and she brings it to you and there's all the numbers and there's everything, so it's perfect. Maybe you just have a look at the risks. But it's not always the case. So sometimes you have to do a bit of the groundwork and you have to start from scratch. It was just a raw idea, if you like, and you have to do all the packaging. Welcome back to the course, Stakeholders Management. I wanted to walk you through this because it's a part that is not as intuitive. For some, the stakeholders management, it is something that is not always obvious to people. What is a stakeholder? Is that the team I'm with? There is this misunderstanding often that stakeholders are the business guys up there giving you the job, and they are very important. But stakeholder is actually not that. It's actually much broader than that. So don't quote me on this. It's just to give you an example of people who could be involved in your project. The questions that you need to ask yourself if you're a project manager and you want to really understand who's involved in the project, who is a stakeholder, is who are you working with on this project? That's your team and the likes. Who will receive the benefits? So this is an interesting one because it's an end user. So you might not be working with them during the life of the project, but it's the people who might be using your products down the track. Let's say you build a website. The users of the website are stakeholders. You need to take them into account. Who can interrupt the project? That's something also that you need to bear in mind. So you need to understand who are the decision makers who could stop the project. Who provides the money? If they don't give you the money anymore, your project is dead. So you need to understand what will impact your budget, what will impact you receiving the money or not for your project. And who will operate the end product? This is more the operation side. The guys who will take over from you when you finish with the project, will take over the product maintenance. You finished, you build your bridge, you've tested it. Now the users are using it. But when there's problems down the track, who will be taking care of the maintenance? You need to bear them in mind, to give them the proper documentation so they can maintain the product that you have created, if you like. Then unofficial definition is who could cause problems during the project and when the project is implemented. For this reason, when I manage a project, I like to keep asking myself, who else should be involved in this project? Who else needs to know about this project? Because if there are people who could impact this project negatively, I want to hear about it now, not later. Give me the bad news and I'll try and deal with it. Instead of them being dormant and when the project is implemented, they come out of the woodwork and they create challenges. To finish on stakeholders very quickly, there is a tool that is being used. So if you hear about it, then you'll know what it is. It's called the stakeholder matrix. I'm just going to walk you through it very quickly. It sounds terrible, but it's a way to categorize your stakeholders. You assess the influence of a stakeholder and you assess the interest of the stakeholder. And based on this, you know how to deal with them more or less. Then you have the low influence, low interest. And what you need to do with them is monitor. So they are not really interested, but they cannot really influence it. So that's fine. They could be low influence and high interest. So they're very interested in your project, but they don't have a lot of influence. So what you do with those, you keep them informed. In my experience, they can be a bit of time wasters. They are super keen, they come to you all the time, but at the end of the day, they have little influence. So keep an eye on them. But the official thing for low influence and high interest is keep informed. The high influence and low interest. Keep satisfied. For me, this is a danger zone. It's the guys, they're not interested, but they could derail the project at any time. I know this is the one that they say just keep satisfied, but for me, it's a challenge. I need to go and dig them out. I really want to know about those. You know, the guys who sit at meeting, don't say a word, and when the project is implemented or getting close to the end, they come to you and say, oh, what are we doing here? So keep an eye on those. The manage closely, those guys, personally, I am less concerned because they have high interest, so they'll be in your face. But according to the rule, it's high influence, high interest, it needs to be managed closely. That's it. Quick summary, stakeholder matrix, now you know what it is. Now the decision has been made during a meeting or formally by email that this is going to be a project. We are still in initiation. We just need to do a few things before we close the initiation and we get formal approval for this. In theory, there's not a project manager at this because it's not a project, but the reason why we would want a project manager is to do all the paperwork, more or less. If the activity is approved to progress as a project, we have to decide who will be doing it, and we have to do some paperwork. Who will be doing it? That's a project team, more or less. We have to decide if we do it internally, in-house, or if we outsource it. We have to decide who will be the business representative. So the business representative, sorry, but it represents the business. So he or she will be signing off on everything, because usually the people who initiate the projects, they are, very, very busy, and they cannot just do the daily or the weekly work on the project. So they will delegate that to someone. Who will be the technical team? We usually put together a steering committee, which is an entity that regroups all the project members and the executive and the business owners and the likes, and the project manager. The second part that needs to be done is to do some paperwork, to have a formal sign-off. So we more or less, we put all the findings of the initiation into this document. We get it signed off and off we go. Off we go to the next phase, which is planning, if you remember. Welcome back to the course. Let's have a look at a couple of team structures. Starting off with the project manager team. One frequent scenario is that the project manager is part of a program where a team of project managers are working on different projects. So a program is a group of projects. I'll give you a very simple example. So we have a program manager on top, managing the program. And we have the first project manager with his team underneath for the project or projects he is working on. Now, as it is a program, we expect to see another project manager. Here he is, your favorite PM. So working on my project, I have this lady. So she looks similar because she is working already on my mate's project there. So we are sharing the resource. So this is an example of shared resource. I also have a team lead working for me. She has a team, but I usually only deal with her. Before I close on this, I wanted to mention a couple of things. The first one is obviously a program can have many PMs, and many PMs can have many projects. So a program can be quite big as far as projects is concerned. Now some quick notes. A project manager can belong to a pool of project managers. It's called a project office or project management office. And also another note is that the project manager can be assisted by a project coordinator. I would say mainly on admin type of tasks, helping with minutes and writing reports and the likes. So that's it, very simple structure, but I think that helps you understand project management within the context of a program. Now let's have a look at the structure of a steering committee. Once again, there are many variations, but I just wanted to give you a simple example. So a steering committee is a temporary structure, and its purpose is to provide direction to a project. Remember that when we define a project, we said the project has to be temporary, not ongoing, a one-off activity. So a steering committee starts at the beginning of the project and is being more or less dismantled at the end of the project. So the role of the steering committee, they make all the important decisions. They can discuss at a very high level the issues of the project, and then when there is a decision to be made, they make it. So let's have a look at a very simple example. On top, we have the steering committee chair. Usually someone high up the chain with a vested interest in the project. So they would be making the ultimate decisions. Then we usually have the business owner. The business owner is also sometimes the chair of the steering committee. The business owner is usually the person who initiated the project, but he represents the business. They champion the project. And it's not always the case, but usually the focus is more on sales. Then we have our familiar face, the project manager. You know what the project manager does, runs the project, but you know that. And we can also have a senior user. A senior user represents all users of the product. So in this example, we have a product that is being created by the project. So let's say the project was to implement a software for a call center. So this lady, she will be representing the call center staff. So she will be very interested in the software being very easy to use, because her focus is on the productivity more than sales. She would have KPIs that she needs to meet and the likes. We don't want to implement something that she doesn't like. So finally, we have a senior supplier. The supplier is supplying the service or the product. In the software for the call center example, it would be building the product. It would be building the software. In a scenario where the building would have been outsourced to a vendor, the vendor will be sitting in the chair of the senior supplier. The vendor will be the senior supplier. So his focus is usually not really on sales or productivity. I think especially in an outsourced scenario, the focus will be more on cost and quality of the product, which are a bit interlinked. Usually they have a fixed price, so they will want to make sure that they implement this quickly and it doesn't drag on too long. And you will keep an eye on the senior user requesting changes that were not in scope and the likes. Now just the last remark, obviously, is that at the beginning of the course, I said the steering committee, you would have project team members could be included in the steering committee. In a scenario where there's a very technical project and you would have an architect or a subject matter expert, an SME, they would also be part of the steering committee, because the goal of the steering committee is to make some very important decisions. So they would want to have the advice of some very key team members of the project. So that's it for an example of a simple steering committee. Initiation is not always required. Sometimes there's no need to debate if we're going ahead with a project or not. We know it has to happen. So for instance, if there's a new regulation that requires you to do the work, and it could be a big work, so it's a project, it's not debatable, but you still need to go through a bit of a super fast initiation just to kick it off and make it formal. And just to give you a bit of a brutal example is the CEO of a company wants to do it. And I tell you, you have to be a very courageous project manager. If the CEO comes to your desk, puts a big file and say, Ben, this is a project. And you say, no, sorry, I have to go through the initiation phase. I need to make sure that this is solid. So it is not always occurring. And sometimes It doesn't have to be very long. As mentioned, if the executive comes to you and they've done all the work, all the paperwork, it's an idea that's been around for a while. You know, it could even happen in one day. I mean, or during a steering committee type of meeting, it's decided. Now the challenge with initiation, as mentioned before, it often, you know, happens very quickly. So it's great when everything has been very thoroughly researched initially, but more often than not, it hasn't been. So you find yourself in a situation where the decision has been made, you go ahead of the project, and as you don't really have time to spend on it, because everybody is really keen to turn this into a project, the schedule and the cost are usually put together very, very quickly. And we talked about, earlier we talked about order of magnitude only for a cost. So that would be good if we were told, okay, don't worry, this is just 6 months estimate, $10 million, this is just a rough idea, do your planning and after, come back to us and give us the new cost or the new budget. I'm sure you can see the catch-22. In order to have a detailed planning and schedule and cost, you need to have the project approved. And to have the project approved, you also need to have a rough idea of the timing and the cost. So it's a little bit of a catch-22. Usually the cost has been decided during initiation, stays with you forever, and then it's not very good, very well received when you say, oh, sorry, the budget is going to be twice as much, unless you can really demonstrate it. And even though you usually have to stick to the initial, budget and schedule. So that's one of the challenges, I believe, of initiation. Just to highlight the challenge with initiation, I wanted to give you a concrete example. I'm going to speculate a little bit. We have a slide here showing the overruns of the Olympic Games. Overrun meaning how much money was spent above what was allocated. We noticed that most of the Olympics have actually had overruns. So why is that? We could speculate and say maybe, if we are cynical, say that maybe they've put some bids a bit lower and they say that they don't need that much money to organize the Olympics to increase their chance to win the bid. But that would be a bit cynical. Another reason is that during execution of the project, and we'll touch on that on the next part of this course, is during execution there are a lot of things that are being discovered that we couldn't anticipate, even with the best intentions. But at this stage, I just want to highlight one reason that I'm sure plays a role in those projects being over budget. So during initiation, we have a limited amount of time to assess the cost. Each city has probably a budget allocated, and they said, for instance, you have 20 million to assess the cost of the Olympics. You cannot go into too much detail because you haven't won the bid yet. You are not a project yet, you're still in initiation. It would be extremely risky to spend 100 million just to assess the cost when you're not even sure that you will win the bid. On the next stage of those projects, once they have won the bid, then they will go into more precise planning and the bad news will start to show up. Hello again. Let's review a multi-phase project, because this is something that can be a little confusing, especially when you learn project management. And also, I wanted to show you 2 ways a multi-phase project can take place. So what we just saw before was the project management phases: initiation, planning, execution, and closing. Now you know those. But what we can also call phase is future implementation of the project, something else to be implemented. For instance, you could have phase 1, we build a simple website to showcase our product. And phase 2, we will allow for the client to purchase those products online. So phase 1, we want the client to be able to see our products, only to see the product and maybe the price, but they cannot purchase it yet. And this is actually the example I will have in the example that comes next. Example on the initiation phase. Those will be called the 2 phases of the project, phase 1 and phase 2. So we have 2 ways to have a multi-phased project. The first way, which is the scenario 1, is we approve it all at the start of the project. We know that we want to have the 2 phases. We know that. We know that down the track we want the possibility to purchase the products online. But we want to have early benefits, and therefore we want to implement into 2 phases. So this is quite similar to the agile methodology. The difference with agile is agile applies a lot of phases. You approve the full project at the beginning, and after you keep rotating between planning, execution, implementation. So this is agile. But here the chunks to implement will be much bigger. So let's have a look at this scenario 1. In initiation, we would approve everything, the budget for the 2 phases and also the schedule for the 2 phases. So when you look at the project manager schedule, you should be able to have a look at the phase 2 as well, maybe not in as much detail, but you should be able to see the 2 phases. So you have the initiation approved, after you go into planning, and after you go into execution where you implement. And after, when you go into the phase 2 work, you don't have to do the closing of phase 1, you don't have to do the initiation of phase 2, you can go straight into planning. But it doesn't have to be sequential. You can start the planning of phase 2 while you are doing the execution of phase 1. So this is the advantage, the benefits, is you know it's approved so you can start work earlier. This is the agile model as well. You don't wait for the end of the implementation to get starting on planning. And after you implement phase 2 and you close the 2 phases of the project at once. So this is one way of doing it. This is the scenario 1. You have 2 phases under the same project. So the second way to go about implementing a project in phases leaves the possibility that potentially we will not be doing phase 2, or at least not in the near future. It is like having 2 projects in a way that we have to go through the full 4 project management phases for each phase of the project. You need to get approval for phase 2 as well as you did for phase 1. And sometimes it's going to occur when phase 2 is a bit too vague to have it approved. But I think that one of the key reasons we would have it this way is it's a way to push some work for later when you really cannot do it now. It's like having 2 projects. In a way, we have to go through the full 4 project management phases for each phase of the project. So you hear that a lot in a project, we will do this in phase 2, which is a polite way to say, no way we are doing this now. We hear what you want, but it will be too big to do it now. This is what I have in my example next. At the beginning of the project, someone wants to implement something too big that scares people a little bit, and they say, oh, we will do that part in phase 2. So this way, phase 1 is a little bit more achievable, and we know what we're doing, and after we can stop and reflect and see if we can get the money for phase 2. So the scenario 2, same as having 2 projects. When phase 2, we're not sure we want to do it at all, or at least not in the near future. So we say, let's do that in phase 2. Great idea. Let's move it to phase 2. So that's it. So that was a quick summary on working on multi-phase project and the different ways to go about it. So in my example next, there is some mention about we'll do that in phase 2. So don't be confused with the phases of the project management. Phase 2 means we'll do this later on. Just wanted to give you an idea of the things that can be done during the initiation for one specific project. Now I've decided to go with the example of a hardware store, say that they want to go online. They only have shops around the country, but they would have to have an online website, to have a website where people can just purchase the products and have it sent to them. So this is the project idea, create a website to allow customers to purchase items online. So an example of activities that could occur, and I put the risks first here. One of the executives maybe raised the idea that we are not ready for the logistics. It's good to have a website that can be done quickly maybe, but we are not ready. I mean, delivering stuff to clients, it's huge. We might have to subcontract, we might have to do all this and go through all the legal stuff, and it's gonna take us too long. So after discussion, it has been agreed to remove this risk. This was just too big to deliver, so we will be doing this in another phase. We will be doing this in phase 2. Another risk that was highlighted, a bit less important, So that would be addressed by shadowing John Martin from Project Start. So John Martin is a business owner, so they will have someone to help him. So just to give you an idea of the type of risks that can be discussed during the initiation. The scope, what do we do? The high-level scope was described as this: create a website for product display only, no online ordering. That has been removed already. The high-level cost, there's been some discussion, and it was maybe originally 12 million, including the delivery and the likes, but now it's only to be able to see the product, so the cost has been reduced to $10 million. And the high-level deadline, just to do the website and everything around the website, obviously, is 6 months. The project team, we have allocated Ben as a project manager. He will create the project charter. And then Ben will get this to get signed off by the business owner and all the people involved in approvals of this project. And now we are into planning. You know, one way to summarize planning in one question is: how will we be doing this project? What are the project activities? In which order will we be performing them? More precise course, more precise schedule. And another key thing coming from the planning phase is: are we really sure we understand what we need to do? And then we can do the planning for the project execution. The only thing about planning that sometimes it's misunderstood is that we are actually planning for the project activities. We are not actually designing anything. We are just planning for the design to happen. For instance, in example we have about the website. During planning, we allocate a business analyst to do the design, but during the execution phase. So the design will be done during the execution phase. So we're planning for the project activities only here. Welcome to the theoretical side of the planning phase. Let's talk a little bit about what's happening in planning. So we are getting more granular on all the initiation phase activities. All that we've done, we're making more precise, more detailed. If there was something that was completely misestimated or wrongly estimated or wrongly understood during initiation, now is the time to raise it. So we confirm what needs to be done exactly. The business requirements document will be created if that applies. Sometimes there's no business requirement. So just to go back to the example of the initiation, when we said sometimes a project has to happen because there's a new tax system or that is being implemented, or there's a new regulation. So we would have everything already chewed up for us. We will know exactly what we need to do. So we don't need any business requirement. We can plan the activities without the business requirements. When can we have this more precisely? What are all the activities required to perform the work? You know, we do a breakdown of the work. So this is when, you know, to go back to the example of the Olympics, this is when you start to see all the little things that has to be done that you didn't really think before. When you break everything into smaller parts, then you can you have a better idea of work to be done, and you're starting to have a look at dependencies between activities, and that will drive the time it will take to perform everything. The longer it is, the more time it will take to support, and therefore the cost will increase as well. You have a look at staff availability, for instance, and that will dictate when you can deliver this. Costing, more precise. As you schedule and your list of activities more precise, therefore your costing will become more precise. We also have a look on how we will be doing this work. So I think that when you plan, it's very intuitive that we want to understand exactly what needs to be done. We want to understand a more precise schedule, and we want to understand a more precise costing. But the how we will be doing the project is something that is not always understood, or to be honest, that is not always being done very well in project management. This is your schedule, this is your cost, off you go. But I think it's very important to discuss how we will be doing this. How we will be doing this sometimes to a certain extent that can change the cost. So let's have a look at some bullet points. How will we be doing it? Which system we'll be using? Which tools, which resource we'll be using? How will we check quality? That's very important. And the quality of the work and the quality of the final product as well. I think it's also intuitive, the quality of the final product. We're going to make sure that this product is is suitable to the business, and also that this product is resilient, it's solid and the likes. But the quality of the work, I mean, as a project manager, for instance, you need to provide quality reports, you need to communicate properly. So everything that has to do with quality, I think you can put it there. And this is also related to quality, as I was mentioning already, is to ensure the final product is in line with what the business wants, the requirements. We understand it has to be solid, resilient, good quality, but if it's not what the business wanted, then that's not much use to them. We need a way to keep track of this. How will we ensure, as we progress in a project, that the product is exactly what the business are expecting? It seems so obvious, but sometimes, even a good-willing business, and they do proper business requirements, they might, as things progress, they might realize that it's not exactly, what they wanted, and it will be useless at the end of the day. And I suppose if you've heard of agile, this is a big advantage of agile, is as you progress, you're starting to show the product to the client, and they can say, oh, look, I know this is what I wanted, but this is not really going to be useful for me. At the end of the day, I mean, having a project that is, on time, on budget is great, but for me, if it doesn't give the business what they wanted, even if they change their mind, for me, it's a little bit useless. Some activities that we do during planning. Are there any new risks that have been uncovered? Now that we are more precise, there's a good chance that we're going to find risks that we didn't think of before. And then we put them in a risk register in this document. We can also check if the risk is a showstopper or not. Is it big enough that we can stop the project? As we progress into planning, we're probably going to have any issues. So this is where we create an issue list or issue register where we put all the issues. I think the most important part of this list is who is responsible for fixing the issue. And as much as possible, the project manager shouldn't be fixing any issues unless it's a governance issue. But there's a tendency sometimes to put the project manager against that. And it's not a very good idea if they don't have the knowledge or the expertise. So we need to find who from the stakeholders can manage this issue. Towards the end of planning, like we did during the initiation, we create a document that outlines all the findings of the phase. A more detailed schedule, we provide a more detailed cost, governance model, testing principles, reporting method, and the likes. Usually this document is called Project Management Plan. I think this is the most commonly used name. And as part of the approval process, the project manager should get this sign-off prior to progressing to the next phase. Remember that initiation, we had a rough cost. During planning, we might find a different type of cost. So it is important that things get signed off again, and because coming out of this, we will have the budget for the project. And we will have the formal timeline and schedule for the project, and we will be tracking against those. So it's very important, if there are discrepancies between what we found in planning and initiation, that we adjust numbers in this document, and we get it signed off by everyone. Now, a quick overview on scheduling. I'm going to talk about the basics here, fundamental scores. I want to show you first the impact of dependencies, and then I will show you an example of a Gantt chart. So you might hear that Gantt chart, so I wanted to show this to you. Let's have a look. So the importance of dependencies, and that will have an impact on cost after we'll get to this. Say you manage a project and you have 3 tasks. I told you it would be simple, very simple. The first task is to design the product. The second task is to build the product. And the third task is to test the product. If you have a look at those tasks, they all have been estimated to be 2 months long if you didn't take the dependencies into account. So you would come and say, my project is going to last 2 months, and it will be implemented in 2 months. Now, obviously, this is not the reality. In reality, you have to take into account the dependency. You cannot start, say, building something until it's being designed. And you cannot start test until the build is completed. So your schedule taking into account dependencies would look like that. And then you would have a 6 months duration instead of a 2 months duration. and then you can implement. So that's simple, and it was just in case you never came across dependencies. And that would help you understand what a Gantt chart is. Our Gantt chart looks like this. On the left-hand side, you have some tasks with duration, when it starts, when it finishes, and the dependency on the task. If we look a bit closer, so dependencies, you have one task here, for instance, and the task after depends on this task to be finished, and this is how it is visualized in a Gantt chart. And this is why the Gantt chart is very popular, and it's the standard for project management to actually create a schedule. So the Gantt chart is a standard to create a schedule. I know you can do it in Excel and the likes, but people usually use the Microsoft product called Microsoft Project. So a budget obviously can be very complex, but I just wanted to give you something to get you started if you've never done that. And if you're interested, super simplified budget process. So this is the way I like to show it. There are three components: the one-off fixed cost, the one-off activities, and then the ongoing activities. So the one-off fixed cost, for instance, the hardware, fees, fixed services, you know you need to buy a server and it's $2,000. That's fixed, that you can put that in your budget. Total goes into your budget. Then you assess the duration of all activities and you calculate the cost for one-off activities. So you calculate how many days it's going to take them to design the product, how many days to build the product, and how many days to test the product. And then you have a total one-off cost, and it goes into your budget. To explain the third component, I'll go back to the example that I gave on schedule before. The third component is for ongoing activities. It's for support costs during the life of the project. Step one, you assess the dependencies between one-off activities, and then you assess the duration required for these ongoing activities, and then you have a total ongoing cost, or the total support cost, and you put that in your budget, and that's your third component. If that doesn't make sense, the third thing yet, let me show you the diagrams that we have done for the schedule. So this is the first diagram. I don't know if you remember. We have ongoing activities, which is project management. You need a project manager for the life of the project. So if the project is 2 months, you need a PM for 2 months. If the project is 2 years, you need a PM for 2 years. The longer the project, the more expensive it will be for those ongoing activities, including the project management activities. Say in the example given below, if we didn't check the dependencies, then we would have thought, oh, this project is going to finish in 2 months, therefore there's only 2 months of project management cost. So that would be wrong. What you need to do is you need to wait for the schedule to finish, and you would have something like this. You would have the design for 2 months, the build for 2 months, the test for 2 months, and the total activity will be 6 months. So the price or the cost of the tasks below will not change, but it's the cost of these that will change. The cost of the ongoing activity will change. So by going back to the slide, you can see that this is a variable, and this depends on the life of the project. So that's it for a very brief overview of budget. Obviously, this is fundamentals course, so I cannot go into too much detail, but I think that will get you started. Back to our example, we are now in planning phase. Scope. Just to give you an example of activity, the business provided the business requirements. These requirements have been reviewed by a business analyst. The business requirement was formally signed off and is in sufficient detail to allow us to design and build the website. So that's fine. So we managed to get the business requirement sign off. I mentioned a business analyst here because usually a business analyst will be the person designing according to the requirements. So therefore it's very important that they understand and that everything is clear and detailed in this document. So the business analyst obviously would sign off, but also the business owner and whoever can sign that off from the business side would have to give a big tick. Schedule. The schedule has been revised from 6 to 8 months. And that needs to be approved. We haven't signed the planning document yet. The cost, as the schedule has extended, as we mentioned, the budget would have to be increased to 12 million again. So it was 10 million before, now we want to bring it back to 12 million. And once again, this needs to be approved. There will probably be a bit of going back and forth. As mentioned, the schedule and the cost that is mentioned during the initiation stays with you forever. So you probably, in this scenario there, you would probably have to put a bit of a fight. You know, in my experience, what happens often is they say, oh, thank you, Ben, very good work, but we're going to stick to 6 months and we're going to stick to the 10 millions. So you're going to have to run with that. But you can still try. The key risk, no additional key risk was uncovered at this stage. Now the project approach, as I was mentioning, the project approach is how we will be really doing this project. So the company will perform the development of the website in-house, but we will be outsourcing the testing to another company. We will hire a security expert for the site safety. So we have a stakeholders list. We have identified exactly who is interested in the project and who can influence it, as we've seen in the diagram in the introduction of this course. And then all that is done, is good. We're becoming more precise with the stakeholder list. Project governance activities. We have now a full-on project team. We've handled the technical team. We have identified the testers. We have identified everybody that we need to run this project. And the project manager has put all that into his PMP, project management plan, and now we're going to seek approval. And that's it for the planning phase. The project management plan has been signed off. We're good to go. Usually what is good practice? What I like to do is to have a big kickoff meeting. As a project manager, it's good, but also you'll see for the business or for every team member, it's very important to attend. We are formally bringing everyone together and say, guys, that's it, we have the approval, we can go ahead and do it. So it's an opportunity, if you are the project managers, to set down some ground rules, to set your expectations. If you are a team member, it's important for you to understand, you know, how this project is going to work, who is involved. Sometimes you don't really know who the business is, who the tester will be, if you're a developer. So you have a good chance here to get introduced to everyone. If you are the business, it's very important as well for you to attend, because you would know the players, if you like. You would know who you will be working with. Obviously, you will be working mainly with the project manager, but you know, you probably have, if there's the business analyst working on your business requirement, you probably spend a lot of time with him or her. You would need to understand how the project works, how the reporting is being done and the likes. So it's very important, if you're the business, to attend this. And after the kickoff meeting, we can clarify a few things and put that into minutes, and then everybody's happy. I like to summarize each phase with a question, and the question I would have for that phase is, how are we going? So the project manager reports on progress and manages risks, issues, and scope. Obviously, there are other things, but I just wanted to keep it simple here. But more or less, the project manager job is to ensure that everything is going according to plan. Welcome back to the execution phase. I want to show you a list of things that a project manager can do to, 1, ensure the project stays on track, and 2, communicate effectively on where the project is at. So one of the things is monitoring all project activities. I mean, this is a little bit obvious. Reporting on project progress, that's for the communication, as well as the next bullet point, which is communicate effectively to all project stakeholders. We've seen that we've identified different types of stakeholders, and each type might require a different way to communicate to them. Fixing issue, that's also a bit of a catch-all. Updating the schedule and the budget as we progress. So this is obviously very important. We don't want to be late. And unlike the Olympics, we don't want to have an overrun. So we want to make sure that by the end of the project, we are still within our budget allocation. Reassessing the risks. So for me, that is a very important one. When I work with my team every week, I will review the risk list and I will ask them, does it still make sense? Do we have any new ones or some that I should remove? But on top of that, I'd like to have more formal monthly or quarterly meetings on the big projects, quarterly meetings, where I invite as many types of stakeholders as I can, especially the business, and I go through this process quite thoroughly. I go through the list and I say, does anyone has any more risk they would like to put on the table? Because what we don't want to happen is, in the middle of the project, someone who comes to you, if you're the project manager, or comes to you as a business person and say, why haven't you thought of that? And then you can say, well, you were part of this meeting, you could have brought it as well. I'm really sorry that we missed that. So it's a way, if you want to cover yourself, to cover the business, make sure that we have these meetings and people really try to dig out any possible risk. Ensuring we are doing no more or less than what was approved in the scope. If the business comes to you and say, Ben, I want to add this on the website. Let's say the example that we gave earlier about the website, and they say, oh, I've changed my mind, I want to have that instead, and I want to have that on top. So it's not just a matter of you saying, okay, no problem. You need to raise a change request, which is a formal document where you highlight the impact of this change. The impact as far as schedule and as far as cost. So it's going to cost more. This change request need to be approved, and then you can add the money to your budget. It said, for instance, that when a change, I will require 1 extra month for you to do the work and an extra million, say. So you need to have this change request approved, and then you can change your time frame to add 1 month and add the million to your budget. Now let's review some of the issues that could be faced during the life of a project. Now the first issue would be that the tasks take longer than planned to execute. And that could be due to various things. It could be a technical issue encountered, it could be a skills issue, it could be poor planning. This is usually the main issue that you would have as a project manager, and that has a flow-on effect on the budget. If things take longer, then it will cost more. Another issue that would come up is that there are some tasks that have to be done that we haven't planned for. It's a bit unexpected, if you like, and that would happen especially for very large projects. I'm just going to mention the Olympics again. It's very difficult to plan every small task when the project is just so big. And also when it's a very technical project, when it's a greenfield project, things that we've never done before. With all the best intentions in the world, you cannot just anticipate every small task that you will have to do. You cannot be that granular during planning. Another challenge that you could have is the team members working on other activities. I don't know if you've heard about the matrix environment. The matrix environment means that you have people working for you on the project if you are the project manager, but they're also working for someone else. And you are not actually their manager. You have what we call a dotted line to them. So in this case, it's very difficult. Let's say they would be allocated 50% to your project. So you need to make sure that they work the 50% that they have allocated to your project. If they work less, then obviously you will have problems. You could get delays. And sometimes if they work more, you need to keep an eye on it as well, because that would mean they would charge you more and that will cost more money at the end of the project. So this is one of the challenges that you would face. Another challenge that I would put down is the stakeholders not engaged or not interested. So that seems to be like quite of a brutal type of statement, if you like, but it happens. It's very difficult for someone who is not actually working on the project all the time. And I'm not talking about technical teams now, I'm talking about even the business or stakeholders. It's very difficult for them to stay focused during the life of the project. And the challenge you would have is they lose interest a little bit, and then they come back 2 or 3 months later when you've led your project to a certain point where they don't like. And then in this case, it's difficult to bring them back. It's very important to keep them engaged, to make sure that they are all on board, so they don't come later down the track and say, oh, this is not the way I wanted this to happen. And then all types of issues that you can imagine. At the end of the day, I think this is why we have project managers, obviously, is that things never go really according to plan. Otherwise, why would you have a project manager? A project coordinator type just to do the administration would be sufficient. Welcome back to the course. We'll talk about the risk register a bit later in the course, in part 3. But I just wanted to show you the dependency between a risk and an issue. That's another thing that can be obvious for some, but I thought I will throw that in here. So you have a risk register with all the risks. So if the risk has not occurred yet, it stays open. It stays active until it occurs. So you have it in your risk register, you manage it in here, you review it from time to time. Now, if the risk occurs, let's say it rains now, and it's delaying things. So therefore the risk has occurred. So what you do is you close the risk, because it's not a risk anymore. It's happening, it's real life, it's now. But what you do, you open an issue. Instead of having the risk, it could rain, instead you have an issue, it's raining. Sorry, it seems obvious, but that's project management talk, if you like. Sometimes it's not intuitive that you have to remove it from the risk register. And then you manage it as an issue. So obviously, sometimes when the risk occurs, there's a plan and you act on this plan. So therefore, it might not even reach the issue stage. But this is the most common flow, if you like. You need to manage it until completion. So that's just to give you a quick overview, because sometimes people ask me, why do we have to register, one for risk, one for issues? That's why I wanted to clarify this. Let's have a quick look at what the end of the execution phase looks like. So usually we have something to implement. So what we need to do is we need to ask the authorization to implement. So that has to come from the business, obviously, but also from the technical teams. Everybody needs to be in agreement that we are going live, that this is really happening. So we can have sometimes a meeting that will be called a go or no-go meeting, where we decide if we go or if we don't go. Sorry for the repetition. So the implementation of the project can take several forms. It could be just a migration of a digital product into the production environment. For IT project, they usually have different environments. They usually have the development environment, the test environment, and the production environment. So the migration of the software into production, that would mean that the end users will be able to access it, to use it. And therefore you can say this is an implementation. On Monday the 23rd, I will implement this project into production. And then this is a big bang implementation and everybody can access it. Another type of implementation is to allow everyone to access the final product. The product was there dormant, if you like, not being used by the full public, and then it becomes available for everyone to use. That could be the case also for a website, but the example I have just here is a bridge, for instance. The bridge is finished, it's all squeaky clean, but nobody is really using it because they are still, finishing the paintings or whatever. But on one day, they say, okay, we're going live, and then everyone can use the bridge. Another type of implementation is just noting that all project activities are completed. If we go back to our going for a walk project that we talked, it feels like a long time ago now at the beginning of this. If we go back to this example, you've done your work and you're going back home. So when you go back home, you say, that's it, this project is implemented, it's finished. It's just taking note that all the activities are completed. The last point is that usually when we implement something, there is what we call a warranty period, when the project is still active to fix any issues post-implementation. During that period, it's still the project team that will be fixing any issues. The main benefit is that the problem will be fixed faster because the project team still has the knowledge. And in parallel, the project team can hand over all the knowledge to any production team. Let's go back to this example. So how is everyone? I hope everyone is still with me. I hope you're still enjoying this. And we're getting close to the end of the phases. There's still another important one though. I want to go back to the example of the website, and I want to show you some example of activities that would happen during execution. Let's have a look. Scope. So the change request presented by the business to include store selection to allow for availability status of the project. So the business came to us and they say, you have the products, that's very nice. Now what I would really like to do is for our clients, by putting their postcode or their suburb, they can check if the store next door, they have the product that they want. If you remember initially we said, oh, we don't want to deliver, but I think this information will still be very useful for them. So the business put that as a request. So the revised cost from 12 to 12.5 million to allow for that change was part of the change request, and the change request was approved. So that means that we can spend more money. The deadline also has shifted because it requires more work, and that was also in the change request that was approved. So instead of having 8 months to deliver, now we have 9 months to allow for this. Issues. The key issue is the key staff developer turnover. So we have a very technical team and there's a lot of turnover, and we're a bit concerned about this. So we did a bit of a brainstorming, and we have a bit of a kind of a solution with being able to take resources from other projects and to work on selfishly on our own project, because it's a very important project, it's a very strategic project, and it looks like we have some agreement on this. Just to give you an example of an issue. Next, regarding stakeholders, the technical team morale has been down due to staff turnover, putting more pressure on others. So this is more a note, if you like. There is this turnover, and therefore when one guy leaves, the others have more work and more pressure. So it's something for me as a project manager to keep an eye on and to work with the team's manager. As mentioned, I don't have a hard line of reporting with them, it's just a dotted line, but I need to make sure that I keep them happy. Project governance, I've done my monthly reports, and there is a note on the next steering committee, will happen on August 24th. Other activity of note, the website will migrate to a test environment on the 22nd of August to allow for a test team to perform the initial testing. So that's just a note also that you would put in your report. You have a date where you implement the project, but it's also good to give some milestones in between. So you go from the development environment to the test environment and after to the production environment. So don't worry if you don't fully understand this environment business. It's just to give you an idea of any activity that could take place. So this was the last slide on execution. And now we have one thing to do. We have to close this project. We have implemented our project. So now we can just move on to another project, right? Not quite. We still have to close the project. There are times where we don't have time to close the project. Sometimes someone comes to you at the end of your project, if you're a project manager, and they say, Ben, you have to work on something else, now forget about this. So closing doesn't always occur as well. So that's already the second phase that I mentioned, it doesn't always occur. And the reason is that sometimes people just move on too quickly. You know, you turn and you look at your team, they're already gone, they're already working on other projects. Same for the project manager, sometimes they move very quickly on other projects. But it's always good practice to do it, and I like to do it as much as I can. And I'll show you some of the activities in there are actually quite important. Let's have a look. The question I use to summarize closing is it all done? And how did we go? So the project manager closes the project when all activities are completed. Some key activities that occur during closing, so that might make more sense when you have a look at the next slide, but for the moment I'll go through this quickly. So is everything completed? Is the budget closed? The budget closed, that means that there was some money, we give it back more or less, or we give a final report on the money. Is there no more open issues? Does the production team know how to maintain the product? We need to make sure that we hand over all the knowledge to whoever will take care of the product moving forward. And how did we go? Any lesson that we could learn for the next time we do a similar project? Let's say you are the project manager, you do something very similar, and you would come to this project lesson learned, and you would say, oh, what have they learned? So I make sure I don't make the same mistake. And this lesson learned, it's usually done during a formal meeting, which we call the post-implementation review. And if you're lucky, you even have a post-implementation review document that summarizes all the things that we've done well and all the things that maybe we didn't do as well or we could improve on. Do we want to reward the team? Usually the answer is yes. Do we have the formal approval to close? So this is the approval part, if you like. You need to make sure everybody agrees. Can I close it? And then the project managers can write a closure document. And this is where they put the final numbers for the budget maybe, and they can refer back to the post-implementation review for lesson learned, so anyone interested can just have a look at this document. But I want to go to the next slide and show you some examples. Let's have a look at some activities that can occur during the closing of the project. I like to split it into two types of activities. I think it makes it a little bit clearer. Make sure you don't lose track of anything. So there is a closing activities and there are the handover activities. I just want to go through the closing activities first. So there's all that is reporting and paperwork. You know, obviously the project closure document, that's very important. The stakeholder signing off on the project closure document also, you know, it's just not just a matter of sending the document and say, you know, all the best, but sometimes just between you and me, please don't say that to anyone else. The project closure never gets signed off. You know, it's hard enough to get the interest and to get someone to sign on a dotted line, but asking them to sign a closure document, it's quite scary. So usually you never get anything back. And then you can file all the documentation. As far as resourcing, you know, obviously you pay the final invoices and you publish the final budget figures. I think your financial team, if you have one, they'll be very interested. And then you obviously release all the resources that you do not need anymore. Lessons learned. If we can, a post-implementation review where we get opinion from everyone. Hopefully it's be a peaceful meeting. Handover activities, I like to put them into two types, the deliverables and then the risk and issues. So the deliverables. So we need to make sure that we have all the sign-offs from the stakeholders. We need to make sure that we provide the documentation of the product to the team that will be maintaining this product. And we need to make sure that they understand it, obviously. And then risk and issues. So that's interesting. So usually you have a few issues. Let's say you implement a website and there's still a glitch somewhere that you try to fix as hard as you could, but you couldn't still fix. So what you have to do is you have to hand over that to the team that will take care of the product. They will fix it themselves. You know, the project cannot go on forever. And sometimes it's a bit rare, but you could have some outstanding risks and you can hand them over to let them know, just so that you know we might still have this risk. But at the end of the day, it will not happen during the life of the project. Keep it in mind. So that's it with closing the project. Let's have a look at the example. Closing phase for our project example, the website to be implemented. Under the scope part, we said there's no outstanding work, so we've done it all. We've implemented all that we were supposed to deliver. The cost, the budget closed at 12.3 million against our estimate of 12.5 million. We have delivered under budget. Issues. There are 3 outstanding technical issues / defects. Those will be handed over to the production support / BAU, which means business as usual team. So it was a website and there's still 3 defects on the website, but we want to close the project, so we hand that over to the production team. Governance, we had the PIR, and I will be sending the minutes to all the executive and to all the stakeholders and all the project team members. Celebrations, yeah, the project team will have final drinks on September 25, as I hope you will have once you finish this course. Now I would like to introduce you to the roadmap that I have created. You have your process, your 4 phases on top, and you have your 9 areas to keep an eye on the left. Now the roadmap can be used 2 ways. You want a refresher on what we do during initiation, you go down that way and then you check everything. And then, if you want to know what's happening in execution, same thing. That's a sequential way of having a look at things as the project progresses. You can have a look at the other way and let's say scope. What do we do in initiation on scope? Planning. What do we do in planning on scope? Execution. What is happening to our scope during execution and in closing? So you can have a look at it in a vertical way and a horizontal way as well. Welcome back. So this is the roadmap that we mentioned at the beginning of the course. I think it will make more sense to you now that you went through the part 2 and we walked you through the process. Let's have a look. Scope during initiation, you ensure that the key components to be delivered are clearly stated. As you go into planning, the business usually creates a detailed business requirements, and the project manager will usually summarize the scope in a PMP. During monitoring, what you need to do is to keep an eye on the scope. And if there's a deviation, you need to address it with a change request. If the business comes to you and they want a change, you need a change request. During closing, it's also very important. You need to make sure that we have done it all and that the business is satisfied. Budget/cost. In assessment of the initiation, you have an order of magnitude. It's high-level budget. In planning, you'd go into more detail. During the execution, you make sure we keep on track. And during closure, we return the funds. Schedule. Initiation, high-level, implementation dates. You go into planning, you have a detailed planning. You are in execution, you monitor regularly, you make sure that we keep on track, and that will take you a lot of your time, and this is where all your issues will come up. The schedule is being delayed. In closing, there is nothing to do. Nobody cares about when you will close the project. You will not get a lot of pressure on this. So I just, to simplify, put no action there. Risks. During initiation, I mentioned that this is where highlighting the key risk is really critical. During planning, you update the risk register if you have more risks, and you plan for the risks a bit more precisely. In execution, you monitor and you update regularly. I talked about monthly meetings with everyone. And during closing, you return the risk contingency, which is, say, if you have to plan for a risk, you said, I want more money because if this risk happens, I want to be able to do A, B, C, and that costs me money. And in this case, you would return that money, obviously, at the end of the project, if the risk has not occurred. Quality in initiation, usually we don't do much. During planning, this is important. This is where you plan for the quality. And during execution, obviously, you make sure that everything is being done according to the book. The project manager is responsible for the quality to be implemented, but is not really responsible for the quality itself. If you have a top-notch test manager and she tells you everything is tested, I'm confident, it's all good, and they show you the test results, perfect, that's all you need. You don't want to go and test things yourself, but you need to make sure that the testing plan has been implemented. In closing, there's no action, quality. Now you could argue that the PIR and the lesson learned, if you do all these meetings properly and you close properly, this is part of the quality of the project. But this is not critical at this stage. The product itself has been implemented and your project is reaching the end phase. Issues. As mentioned, you're in trouble if you have issues during initiation, but usually it's pretty quiet. They start to crop up into planning, and this is where you create your issue log. And then during execution, this is more or less all that you're doing. You fix issues and you monitor them and you allocate them. And in closing, you check if there's any outstanding issues, and if they are, you make sure that you hand them over to someone else because they still need to be fixed. You just don't want those to be forgotten. Project administration. During initiation, your key job as a project manager is to write a project charter that will summarize the findings. Same for planning. The difference is a project management plan, summarize the findings of planning. And during execution, you need to make sure that you communicate. You chair meetings, you produce reports, project reports. It's all about communicating with stakeholders and the likes. And then in closing, you write the project closure document, lesson learned document, and the likes. Stakeholders, you create a stakeholder matrix, or you try to do it, it's not often done. And then you have the org chart, the project team definition. This is where you define your team. In planning, you refine it. Now you know more information, so you might want to bring more people into it. You might want to outsource some components of it. And in execution, you execute the communication plan. You execute the communication plan based on the stakeholders. For this type of stakeholders, I'm going to communicate this way. So you have your weekly meetings with your team, say, you have steering committees, you have formal reports. And in closing, there's nothing to be done. Approval. So I have approvals, as I mentioned, in a separate area because I think it's important to highlight the key parts that need to be signed off. During initiation, the key thing to be signed off is the project charter by the business usually. They are the one who want the project, or by whoever has initiated the project. During planning, PMP needs to be approved, signed off. During execution, a lot of things need to be signed off along the way, depending on the structure of the project. So for an IT project, you will need to sign off on the design, on the testing, on the going live. But on other types of projects where these components are not included, then it could be simpler. You could just say, okay, I'm finished everything, all is done. Are we good to sign off on this project? During closing, the project closure document, if you manage to have it signed off, it'll be very good. And that can be signed off by the business, the steering committee, or whoever. So this is the roadmap. I found that my students are responding very well to it. And it's also, at the end of the course, it's also a very good way to summarize and review everything. So I haven't really walked you through it exactly word for word, so have a look. But that's a good summary of the project management process. Welcome back. Now we are more in the summary part of the course. So a good way that I found sometimes to really understand a process and really actually nail a process is to really understand its outputs. I have selected 7 documents that I believe if you understand them, you will understand project management better. Whether you want to become a project manager, but also if you're any type of stakeholder and you are involved in the project. So you could ask the project manager for any of those documents, and then 1, you will sound like you know what you're doing, and 2, that will really help you better understand the project and where to find the information that you require. No big surprises. I believe that I've mentioned already those documents, but it's good to have a look at them from a different perspective. I think it's very good for retention. I'm sure you're dying to know what those 7 documents are, so let's get started straight away. Here they are. Project charter, reports, any type of reports, schedule, issue list, risk register, budget, and PMP, project management plan. Let's start straight away with the project charter. As you can recall, at the end of the phase, we need to decide if yes or no we are going ahead with this project. So this document should help everyone. And actually, it's more a formality. I think usually the decision has already been made. But it's good to refer back to this document, whether you're a project manager or a stakeholder. You can go back to this document and you can have a bit of a time machine and you can have a look at how it really all started. So this document contains the cost, the time frame, the key risks, and the likes. When end of initiation phase and why this document has been created is to provide the formal approval to proceed as a project. Next documents are reports. What type of reports? I'm just saying report, it means any type of project report. It could be the weekly reports, it could be the steering committee, it would be the monthly reports. So what happens is, the more frequent the reports, the more detail you put into them. Your weekly reports are usually for your manager or even for the team, just to give them a quick update on what's happening, what we've done during the week. But as you go up the chain, they don't have time to go through all these details. You have steering committee report, has to be very succinct, only the key issues and how we're doing. And the monthly report it's usually also for executives or people that are, in theory, we are more and more busy as we go up the chain. It's not always the case, but this is what they want us to believe anyway. When? Weekly, monthly, or ad hoc? Why? Because those reports provide an up-to-date status on the project. There is also a quick way to check the project status. It's called the traffic lights. Green, amber, or red. Green, it usually means that the project is going okay. Amber means some issues are starting to creep in. And red is project is not going well. It's probably going to be late or above budget. Why do we have those traffic lights? As mentioned, the top-notch executives, they usually go through 20, 30 project reports, but it's a good way for them to quickly go. Usually they focus on the one that are not going well, and we understand why. So that's it for the reports. Schedule. So it's sometimes called a plan. The problem with calling it a project plan, there's a bit of confusion with the project management plan that we'll see. But for me, it's anything that has a date in it. It can be a Gantt chart. Let's have a quick look, refresher what a Gantt chart is. Looks like this. Or it could be just a simple list of milestones. What I like to do in my report, I just put the key milestones so we don't have to go through the full Gantt chart every time. When? Could be have a look at any time. Usually during the initiation and during planning also, it's still being drafted, it's still quite high level, but at the end of planning, you should have a very solid schedule and all your assessment of the project will be based around that schedule. Why? I mentioned this allows you to have an idea of where the project is at, not only by the end date, but also by the milestones. If you have a project that you are interested in, that is going to be implemented in July, and you go to see the project manager in February, and you ask him or her, when is this project going to be implemented? Are we on track? It's going to say, yeah, that's fine, July will be implemented. But if you look at the schedule, and you will notice some milestones happening in maybe February, March, April, and you can check how the project is tracking in reference to those milestones. Because otherwise you don't want to wait early July and say, so are we on track or not? Oh no, by the way, it's going to be September now. So this is what you want to avoid. Now let's review the issue list. So it's a document containing the project key issues, including the impact of the issue, who is owning the issue, and when we are anticipating to resolve the issue. Same thing. You go to the project manager, how are we doing, and say, oh, we have a couple of issues. But you don't really want them to be summarized that quickly. So you can go to this document, you can have a look. The impact of the issue. Is it an issue that is actually impacting the budget or the timeframes? That will be the key thing I want out of this, the impact of the issue. Who is owning the issue? We don't want to be in a situation when, oh, but I thought you were working on this. And there is also this assumption that the project manager is managing everything. I think I already talked about that, but it's very important that, you know, any type of issue, technical and the likes, that the project manager puts that to someone else. It's very important that the owner of the issue knows that he or she has to fix it. And by when? You know, when are we anticipating to resolve this issue? Because I'm working on it. That's not good enough. I mean, sometimes it's very difficult to assess, obviously, but we need another date where we can meet and say, well, we agreed on this date, now still trying to work on it, can we do something to help, and the likes. When? Hopefully you don't start raising issues during the initiation of the project, when it's not even a project. But I would say that it's during execution that this document is the most active. And why? I mentioned it already. This lets you know where they are the issues, who wants them, and how close are we to fixing them. We want to remove the vagueness of the report. We want to really understand where we're at. Now for the risk register. Document containing the project key risks. As for issue, we need to document the impact of the risk. If this risk happens, is it going to impact anything, the budget, the time frame, or it's just going to be a bump on the road? What are we doing about that risk? We could accept it, we could avoid it, we could mitigate it. I mean, there's an array of things that we can do, but I think for this fundamentals course, I'm not going to go into detail, but if you're aware that there is acceptance, avoidance, mitigation, that's already a very good start. You could say, yeah, accept it and say, yes, I know this risk could happen, that's fine, I'm okay with it. No, I don't want this risk to happen, and I want to avoid it at all costs. During the walk, that there could be some very heavy rains. What do we do if we have heavy rains? It's good to have a plan for that. Owning a risk, you need to monitor the risk. And if something occurs, you need to initiate the mitigation plan. You cannot do that all the time as a project manager on all the risk, so you need to have an owner for that risk. You could say, you take care of this risk, you monitor it, let us know if it becomes more likely to happen, and when it occurs, let me know, we will initiate the mitigation plan, or we will do what we said we'll do if that risk occurs. When? Used anytime. But we create it during the initiation. It is key during the initiation, as I mentioned. I don't want to repeat myself too much, but a risk could be so big that we just decide we don't do the project at all. So why this list makes everyone aware of the risk of the project would face. This is an awareness communication tool. And this is the way I like to say it. It's an awareness communication tool. Budget. There is no standard in project management. There is not one single template that all project managers use. What's important is the numbers at the end of the day. It doesn't really matter how you get them. So this document needs to include several things. How much money we have allocated to the project, how much money we have spent so far, and how much will it cost to complete. I have on the next slide, I'll show you a very technical diagram on this. So created during the initiation, where it's still broad brushes, and during planning, this is really when we have the final version. As for the schedule, once the planning is approved in the project management plan, we have the schedule and the cost, they are frozen. And after they are being used to check if you are over budget or under budget. Why? Because we want to be able to compare A with B plus C. At start of the project here, 40 million, say, this is the budget allocated. And now you have several months into the project, you have spent 20 million, and you redo your budget, you recalculate. This is what I have left to do, how much is going to cost me to perform those activities. It will cost you 22 million to finish the project. So you had B plus C, and that gives you 42 million. And you know now that you're going to be over budget. You might be able to do things to bring you back on course though. So this is why it's good to be aware of that early. Final document, the project management plan, or PMP. This document is created at the end of the planning. It is a very important document as well, because we have completed planning, so we know much more. And you are expected as a project manager to have a good grip on the cost and the schedule at this stage. Unlike initiation, where everything is happening quickly, now you have done all your planning, so you should know much better how much money you will need and when the project can finish. On top of that, this document really dictates how we will run the project, who will be testing, are we going to outsource some of the work, what are the quality controls that we'll have in place. This should be the first document that you ask for. If you're a project manager, you take over a project, you want to know what is in this document, because that really, this is your baseline. This is what you will base your work on. This is what you can check if we're going off course. It's created during planning and signed off at the end of planning. So when we go into execution, we have this document signed off, printed on our desk, and why, as I mentioned, it can be used as a reference. Now, if you're on top of those documents, I think project management doesn't have any secret for you on the high level. We're still at the fundamentals level here. You might have noticed I left aside several documents. I'm trying really to condense the knowledge for you. But one of the documents is the stakeholders matrix, or the stakeholders assessment matrix, or stakeholders management, or all the likes. Because I found that unfortunately this document is not always created. Sometimes they give you a template and you can use it, but it's often, forgotten. It doesn't contain any really juicy components that is required during the life of the project. It's nothing to do with time frames or cost. It's more or less a communication plan. Welcome back. We're still summarizing, reviewing things at this stage. And what I think is important is, how do we talk to each other during a project? I believe this will help you if you are involved in a project. You know already some of the jargon, you know the questions to ask. So I think that would be very helpful for you to keep an eye on this. Those are suggestions that I have. Don't ask this, don't ask them who's involved. I'm sure you can answer that one, but what do we ask them? Can I check the stakeholders list? As mentioned, it's not often created, so that'll be a good test. Don't ask, where are we at? Ask, can I see the last project report? Because I want to really see numbers. I want to see the real thing. Don't ask, are we thought of something? You can say, can I check the risk register? Because the project manager might tell you, yeah, we thought of that. But if you can access the register, then you know all the key risks. You can select only the key risks, and you can check what are we going to do about those and who is owning them. That's a much more granular view of things. And also you can see, oh yes, there is this other risk too. I haven't thought about that one. It's good to know that they've thought about it. Don't ask this. Any problems? It's just too vague. And if it'd be very hard for you to differentiate the small problems from the big problems. So what I suggest is, any key issue in the issue list. But you could have an issue that starts the morning, and then the evening it's solved. If you go and see a project manager, and let's say she's at a desk, and you go to her and you ask her, do we have any issues? And she tells you, oh yeah, we have this. Oh, that this just came up and I'm really overwhelmed by it. But it might just be finished by the end of the day. So she must just be thinking about that issue now because it seems critical and it just came up. But you want to have a look at the long-term view as well. You might have issues in your issue list that could be even bigger than the one she mentioned to you. Don't ask any change of plan. Ask any change request approved. Because once again, it has to be approved until it's a change of plan. Say they tell you, oh, I don't know, they want this and they want that, but this is just noise until it's approved. Then you're better off just knowing what has actually been approved. That removes all the noise. How did we go on this project? I've heard everything went well. Is that true? Any lessons learned? Can I see the document? Can I see the PIR? Because it's very vague. Once again, it depends how interested you are in a project. Obviously, you might not care that much, but if you care a lot, let's say you're a project manager and you want to do a project that is very similar. You're not going to ask the PM, how did we go? You say, can I see the lessons learned document? If they don't have a lesson learned document, the best thing for you to do is you ask the project manager, but also ask the other stakeholders. Because the project managers that have a very specific view say, oh yeah, it went okay. But the stakeholder might have a completely different view. I mean, and the other way around, the project manager might think, oh, that was issue after issue after issue, but the technical teams or the stakeholders might just think it went okay. Just a note to close on project management, I suppose, is that some companies can be quite small and at the same time quite mature with a strong governance, and they don't always need projects for smallish activities because they are very flexible, and when they know that someone is doing it, they know that he or she is doing it, they have visibility, and therefore they choose not to use projects for those activities. They can also, as they are small, they can easily keep track of the cost and the likes. On the other end of the scale, large companies, usually government companies or very big companies, they usually have a project for everything. So it can become quite heavy, and also the benefits, I think, sometimes are quite questionable. So they like the idea of having all the budget centralized, all activities visible from a central point. So they can see exactly what's happening, how much money is being spent across the board on those activities. They love having everything centralized so much that they are willing to pay the price for overusing project management in a way by having a project for everything. So the challenge with project management is not in the process itself, it's when it's overused.